have the courage to do what's right by those people who have suffered from the hurricane, Beto will change that. Money will flow as it should to the people who should have it. But the most important thing that I think I can say tonight in light of circumstances that have developed as of late is this. Women have not been treated fairly. They have not. Didn't get the right to vote when men got the right to vote. Didn't get the right to own property when men had the right to own property. In my lifetime, women couldn't have credit cards in their names. In my lifetime. Women have not been treated justly. But we have a candidate who understands the importance of what's happening before the Supreme Court of the United States of America. We have a candidate who's going to stand up for the rights of women, who's going to make sure that their voices are amplified through his office, and I guarantee you, and I say this without question, reservation, hesitation, or equivocation, he will not bend, he will not break. He is going to stand for Roe versus Wade and make sure that it remains the law of the land to the extent that a governor can. He will defend Roe versus Wade. And if you believe we ought to defend Roe versus Wade, make some noise, because we want to hear all the way to Washington, D.C. We are going to stand up and fight for Roe versus Wade. A woman's right to choose cannot be abrogated simply because some people think that they have the power to control women. You cannot control women. Women are their own source of power. So friends, I'm about to now bring the person of the hour, the person who's going to make a difference in the lives of Texans, and he's going to represent all of Texas. It is my honor to ask you to stand with me and welcome the Honorable Benjamin Award and Miss Governor in the state of Texas.
Ladies and gentlemen, Al Green. I was lucky enough to work with Al for 6 years. I was in Congress for 3 terms, representing my hometown of El Paso, Texas. And you will not find someone who better represents this ideal of a public servant who has the courage of their convictions. Willing, he was talking about the truth right now. Willing to speak the truth, whatever the cost or the consequence to him personally or politically. I saw it firsthand after the 2016 election. In the first months of that Trump administration, there were some people who were pulling their punches, holding their fire, seeing, this doesn't sound right what he's doing, this Muslim ban. I don't think that makes sense, but maybe he meant something else. Maybe he's just kind of a wild guy in the way that he talks. Talking about putting kids in cages or separating children from their families. I don't know, does he really mean this stuff? Al Green knew exactly what he meant. And he called not just Southeast Texas's attention to the challenge, he called this nation's attention to the challenge. He really rung the bell, helped to wake us up, those of us, his colleagues in that institution, who sometimes are just too insulated from the truth and its consequences. And I'll tell you what, he was a lone voice at the beginning of that fight. But I hope you are as proud of him as I am, because when the rest of the Congress finally woke up, they followed Al Green's lead. And they made sure that we held him to account, and that man has not one, but 2 impeachments on his record. That will show in the history books forever going forward. This guy saw it before anybody saw it, and it's not just on that. It's on issues big or small that matter to his constituents, including his new constituents here in Brazoria County. It is the issues that will define the future of this country. And we are all very lucky to have him in a position of public trust. Very lucky to have Alma and Ron, who fight so hard for their communities as well. Listen, talk about a battle that's tough. Going up against Greg Abbott, going against that lieutenant governor, going against that Republican majority. It gets more wild and more extreme and more on the fringe by the day. And yet, going back in session after session to make sure that they can fight for their communities and deliver what they can, finding common ground where it's available. Never coming back and saying, you know what, I just can't work with these Republicans, it's too much. You all would kick them out of office if they said that. They find a way because they have the will. We're really blessed with these people who are doing everything they can with the best years of their lives to serve this community. And I want us all to remember this and to share this with others who may be independents, who may be Republicans, say this is what happens when we elevate Democrats into these positions of power and public trust. They deliver. They make sure that they take care of one another. They're willing to tell the thing by its rightful name, no matter the cost or consequence, no matter the polling, no matter what happens in the next election, no matter the politics. We're going to do the right thing every single time. That's what this race is about. That's why I'm running. That's why we're all doing this together right now. And I want to thank you for coming out on a Friday night. So many other things that you could be doing. So many movies out there to watch. So many great restaurants to sit in with your date or your husband or your wife. Kids' birthdays that you could be at. Important things happening in your life right now. And you're here because this is an important thing happening in your life right now, right? Not the candidate, not the political party, but the very fact that the future and the fortune and the fate of the great state of Texas is being decided in our midst right now. 6 months away, más o menos, from this day, we will know where we are headed going forward. And it will be, as the congressman just described, this dark path where maybe it was a failure of imagination on our part, an inability to dream up the fact that abortion would be outlawed in the state of Texas at conception, with no exception for incest or rape at all in this state. That they'd put a $10,000 bounty on the back of anyone who tries to assist any woman in making her own personal, private healthcare decisions about her own body and her own future. That we would have a governor targeting the parents of transgender kids and asking school teachers to turn them in for child abuse. I couldn't have cooked that up in my brain. I couldn't imagine it would come true, and yet it is our reality today. That we'd have someone in the greatest position of power in Texas who could not keep the power going when the temperature dropped last year. Lights went out, heat stopped running, water stopped flowing, and we lost one another. More than 700 people in this state lost their lives. Conroe, Texas, an 11-year-old boy, his mom, could not pile enough blankets on his body. And he died sleeping in his bed here in the energy capital of the world. Vietnam-era veteran, couldn't charge his oxygen tank in his house, took it out to his truck where they found him dead of hypothermia. Those stories repeated time and time again. That wasn't an act of God. I say that in this house of worship. It was not due to Mother Nature. It was the cruelty, the corruption, and the incompetence of that person in power who could not guarantee that the power would flow to the people when they needed it the most. Hard for us to believe, but it is our reality right now. The question for us is what we're going to do about it, right? We know what we're up against right now. What we have to ask ourselves is what we are willing to do. And it's our own conscience that we must answer to. Our maker for those who believe, but it's also our kids and our grandkids and the judgment that we are sure to face from them. When they look back on the year 2022 and they read what I just described in their history books and they say, hey, Mom, Dad, Grandma, Grandpa, when all this was going on, please tell me you were fighting to save the future for me. Please tell me that you got after it, that you were knocking on doors, that you did the right thing at this defining moment of truth for all of us. Because, hey, I was defenseless. I was a child. I wasn't even born yet. There was nothing I could do. We were counting on you. That's the message we've got to receive right now from the people of the future who are looking back on us from 30, 40, 50 years away. Think about that. And think about what you're willing to do right now. Because this is not going to be about a single person. This is no cavalry riding to anybody else's rescue. We are not bystanders. We're not in the audience. We're not watching this happen before our eyes. We have to. We must be in the game if we are going to affect the outcome. And I want to hearten us tonight. I want to encourage us tonight. I want us to feel boldly about our prospects given the challenges that we face. Because not only is it possible to overcome this darkness and to do some really great things for one another and our fellow Texans, but I want to remind you that we have done it before under much greater odds. Let me begin with our democracy. Now, the last time that I saw, or one of the last times that I saw Eugene Howard, was marching from Georgetown, Texas, to our state capital. It's about 30 miles, and we were joined by Bishop Reverend Barber and the Poor People's Campaign to call attention to the fact that Texas has the most restrictive voting laws in the country. And that's putting it charitably. It's voter suppression, it's voter intimidation, it's picking and choosing on the part of the governor who will be able to vote in the next election. And no surprise, I think, to anybody here, anybody who's watching, or anybody who has a conscience, but those who have been elevated in power politically in the state of Texas are those who would vote for Governor Abbott, and probably who look like Governor Abbott. Those who have political power withdrawn. 750 polling places closed in the state of Texas in the last 10 years, twice as many as the next closest state, concentrated in the fastest growing black and brown neighborhoods in Texas. A voter ID law, the most onerous in the nation, that says you can use your license to carry a firearm to prove who you are at the polling place, but lest you use your student ID at Texas Southern University, we will reject you. Very clear who we want to vote and who we do not want to vote in the state of Texas right now. One ballot drop-off location in the midst of a pandemic that killed 90,000 of our fellow Texans. You have to drive clear across Houston and Harris County to drop off that vote. And how many people said, you know what, the heck with it. It's just too tough. I care about my health. I got a sick relative at home. I'm going to stay home right now. 13% of the ballots in this last primary election rejected. The previous high water mark was 1%. I mean, you would be hard pressed to describe this as a democracy anymore right now in the state of Texas. But let me tell you this. You cannot succumb to the temptation to despair. We got to be clear-eyed. We have to know what we face. We got to know exactly what we're up against going forward. But we cannot succumb to despair, because if we do, that means we submit to this as our outcome. Here's what I think about this. 1923, Ron's and Alma's predecessors, in their infinite wisdom, decided that if you were black in the state of Texas, you could not vote in an election. And it wasn't how many jelly beans are in the jar or recite this part of the state constitution. It was literally written in black and white in state statute that if you were black, you could not vote in the Democratic primary. There was no Republican Party at the time to speak of. They didn't have the numbers to even hold a party primary in the state of Texas. It was the Democratic Party that decided your justice of the peace, your county commissioner, your state representative, your state senate, your congressperson, your governor. And under state law, starting in 1923, if you were black, you couldn't vote for any of them. No voice, no vote in the outcome. In 1924, one of my fellow El Pasoans, Dr. Lawrence Nixon, a physician who was born in Marshall, Texas, moved to El Paso, starts the first chapter of the NAACP in this state in 1914 in my hometown. He goes in to vote, paid his poll tax, shows his receipt. The polling judge there says, Dr. Nixon, you know we can't let you vote. And Nixon says to them, I know you can't, but I've got to try. And what Nixon does after he's rejected, he takes his case to the district court in El Paso, Texas. He loses, he appeals, takes it all the way to the Supreme Court and wins there once, wins there again a couple of years later. While he's banned from voting, every 2 years he goes to the same polling station with that receipt from his poll tax that he keeps paying, even though he knows it's against the law for him to vote. And every time they say, Dr. Nixon, I mean, we told you last time we can't let you vote. He says, I know you can't,
but I've got to try. Year after year, decade after decade, this guy keeps trying. But he's not alone. Not too far from where we are, Lonnie Smith from the 5th Ward of Houston, Texas, also tries to vote in the year 1942. Is rejected again because of the color of his skin, takes his case all the way to the Supreme Court, and ultimately in 21 years after they put this on the books, he prevails in the case now known as Smith versus Allwright, integrating, at least partially, the elections in the state of Texas. So you think about what we are up against right now. This form of voter suppression and voter intimidation that overwhelmingly targets black voters and brown voters and voters with disabilities, the very young and the very old. This is tough, but we can overcome it because we've done it before against tougher odds, and we need to remember that. We think about those right now who are struggling to be healthy enough or well enough to attend this meeting tonight. Maybe they couldn't get here. Those who have diabetes, maybe now they have glaucoma, can't afford insulin because our governor won't take yes for an answer and expand Medicaid in the state of Texas. If he were to do that, $10 billion annually would flow down to Brazoria County and the other 253. It would hire more doctors and providers, more mental health care specialists, connect more people with care, fewer dying of that diabetes or curable cancers or the flu. You know, it's hard right now being the least insured state in the country, and the most vulnerable among us are paying the price. Now, I know that we can overcome that because we have before, and you all probably know this history as well, but in the first part of the 20th century, routinely people were dying because they didn't have the ability to see a doctor. But it was our fellow Texan, Lyndon Baines Johnson, the first Texas president, who in 1965 signs Medicaid into law. So this program that our current governor is rejecting, we cooked the thing up. We invented it right here in Texas. We made it possible for this country. We overcame those odds leading up to 65, and we prevailed. We can do it again right now. I know it. And on the issue that the congressman began with, the fact that we now have this draft opinion written by Justice Alito that we think represents a majority of the Supreme Court that will overturn half a century of the law of the land, of a constitutional protection of privacy. Privacy to make your own decisions about your own body, about your own health care, about your own future. You know, it confirms what we thought we knew was going to happen, and yet nonetheless, when that news broke, it hurt, knocked the wind out of us, made it really tough to move forward, especially here in Texas, because our governor, Greg Abbott, signed something that's called a trigger law. What that says is that 30 days after that decision is finally rendered, abortion will be illegal in the state of Texas, again, beginning at conception. We know that we live in the midst of a maternal mortality crisis, 3 times as deadly for black women here in the state of Texas. We lead in a way that we don't want to lead most of the developed world, and how dangerous it is to be a woman right here in the state of Texas, because you all know this, but we got to share it with our friends. You close down those reproductive health care clinics. Not only is it harder now to get that legal abortion, and by the way, it is still legal, it's still the law of the land, but try getting a cervical cancer screening. Try getting any family planning help at all. Try seeing a doctor in some of these remote rural counties where that might have been the only physician or provider that you were going to be able to see. Pretty dark, pretty tough, but we can overcome it because we have before against greater odds. Prior to 1973, and that Roe versus Wade decision, abortion was outlawed. It was illegal in Texas, just like they want to do it again under Greg Abbott. But no one rode to our rescue from the outside. Nobody saved the day for the state of Texas. It was actually Texas women. Many of you know this, but Jane Roe of Roe versus Wade was a Texan. But so were both of her attorneys. Linda Coffey, Sarah Weddington, both Texans, born and raised in the state. They pled her case before the justices of the Supreme Court, and they prevailed at the end of the day. One of the hallmark decisions from that court, won by Texas women against extraordinary odds. So we can do this. We've done it before against much tougher odds. That's the thinking, all right? That's the way that we have to approach every challenge before us. We can do this. We have got this. We know that no one's going to help us from the outside. I wish the DOJ would come in here and enforce the Voting Rights Act so that people can vote freely, but they're not going to. Do not hold your breath. I wish those justices would recognize the precedent that's been set and honor their word when they testified before the Senate. They said, when they were asked about Roe versus Wade, that's a settled law of the land. I'm going to respect that. They lied to us. I wish there was a consequence for it, but there's not. At least not right now. This one is on us. It's on you. It's on me. It's on everybody here. And what we have to decide again is just what we are willing to do. And this is what I'm going to ask you to consider. I'm running for governor. We win this race, we can make every single one of these things better. Not only can we stop these attacks on our fellow Texans, but we can start doing some good things that most of us actually agree on. The kinds of jobs that we want to create here in the energy capital of the world, we want to expand that leadership in wind and solar and geothermal and hydrogen. We want those to be good union jobs that pay a real wage, that have protections, that ensure that you have a skill and a trade for your life, that will allow you to have that purpose and function that we all crave. We can get behind that, Republicans and Democrats. Get behind those world-class school teachers who make public education possible. Those women and those men, the librarians, the counselors, the classroom teachers, the nurses, everyone who makes public education possible. And right now, the most difficult time to be in those schools and to be there for those kids who've lost a grandparent to this pandemic, whose folks may have lost their job in the recession that ensued, who may have lost their home and may be bouncing from one couch or one relative to another, one district to another. That teacher may not know where that kid is right now. And what I hear from them when I listen to them all across this state is they say, hey, Beto, the reading, the writing, the arithmetic, of course we're focused on that. We know that's going to make these kids competitive going forward. But right now, given the trauma that they have endured, I'm just trying to keep them alive. And the last thing that I need is another high-stakes, high-pressure STAR test. It's going to take all of that energy and focus it on something that doesn't adequately measure the performance of those kids or their potential or the effort that I'm expending. What I need you to do, Beto, right now, and anyone in a position of power, is to respect me. Treat me as a professional that I am. Pay me what I'm worth so I don't need to work that second or third job just to make ends meet. I have yet to meet the retired educator, whether she's a Republican or a Democrat, rural community or big city, who isn't upset about the fact that since 2004, there has not been a cost of living adjustment in the state of Texas. Inflation this year alone, thanks in large part to Greg Abbott, is up over 8%. Cost of living adjustment, not happening in the state of Texas for those retired teachers. When we think about the next generation coming into the profession, they're going to look to their grandparents and to their mom and dad to see how they have been treated. And we need that to be a positive story. So Republican, Democrat, Independent alike, again, we can get behind world-class schools by supporting world-class educators. These things that Abbott has us focused on, that tear us apart, pit us against one another, stoke division, and further fracture this state, that doesn't have to be us. In fact, it is not us. It's not reflective of who we are. That's what happens when 7 million eligible voters in 2020 who could have cast a ballot in the state of Texas did not. Not for any lack of love of democracy, not because we're lazy, but because we were drawn that way by those in positions of power right now. The only way to overcome this is by going out and meeting those 7 million at their doors. And that's my ask. I asked you to think about what you're willing to do. This is what I'm going to ask you to consider doing. You can text the word Texas to 20377, and I will sign you up to knock on doors. And I'll be real clear with you, because if nothing else, you deserve honesty. This is not easy. This is not always fun. But it's going to be the only way that we're going to win this election. I can come up with the most brilliant television ad that man or woman has ever seen. We can spend millions of dollars on slick mailers that may pile up on your kitchen table. You won't ever read those. We can tweet really clever things. We can post wonderful videos on Facebook. Maybe you see it, maybe you don't. You'll never forget another human being knocking on your door and having the courage to talk to a complete stranger about this upcoming election and the future of this state. And I'm not asking you to memorize a script. I'm not asking you to sell anybody on anything. You, from your own heart, in your own words, describe what this election means to you, why you came out here to be with me tonight, to ask your question, to participate in your democracy. You do that. And I guarantee you, that person who did not vote in that last election is far more likely to vote in the next one. And just to put those 7 million in context, we lost to Ted Cruz in 2018 by 216,000 votes. That's it. 7 million out there who are not represented or reflected in the decisions that we're making. That explains the otherwise inexplicable. How do you get the abortion ban? Why do you reject Medicaid? Why aren't we funding educators and schools? That's not how we feel. That's not the will of the people. That's what happens when you constrain this democracy. We are going to liberate it, but it's got to be us. Can't wait for anybody else to do it. So I urge you, if you want to make sure that you have done your part and that we win this race, please text Texas to 20377. Last couple things before I turn the floor over to you and have a chance to listen to you. You've heard what we're for, and I want you to share that with your friends and family, your colleagues, your classmates. Hey, I know that Beto came to Pearland. What did that guy talk about? What's he for? Well, he's for great jobs, world-class schools, and the ability to see a doctor. On that much, we can agree. He wants to get past the smallness of Greg Abbott, this infighting over who gets to go into what bathroom and play on which athletic teams. This attack on women. And listen, I know that Al Green feels exactly the way I do on this one, and I guarantee you Ron and Alma do as well. Not only must we restore a woman's right to choose, but we must also do better when it comes to how women are treated in every other aspect of life in Texas, like making sure they're paid the same, that men are paid for the same work, offering the same value. That's a positive thing that we're going to be able to do. Tell your friends that. Tell them that that's what we're about. No more division. No more fighting. We're going to find the ways that we can collaborate and make this state better for all of us. But again, also bring them in and tell them they are going to have to be part of this team to do the work to make sure that we can get it done. There was a poll that came out a few weeks ago. Greg Abbott, 42%. Beto O'Rourke, 40%. I just want to tell you, you got to believe this, and you got to hold on to this. This is possible, totally doable, but it's only going to happen with you and me bringing it home. We know the voters are out there. We know that we can meet them. All I need to know is if you're going to be on the team. Can I count on you? We're going to do this. All right, I'm going to make sure that we get as many voices into the conversation as we can. Cynthia has a microphone, and if you raise your hand, she will come find you, and we'll get you into the conversation. I'll try to answer as many questions, hear as many ideas as I possibly can, but I want to thank everybody for coming out. I want to thank our hosts at Silver Lake Church, the great elected officials who are here, who make us proud, and each one of you. And so I'm all ears. Where's that microphone? There we go. Hey.
Hi, Beto. Rhonda Hart.
Good to see you.
Army veteran. Can we please talk about the poor soldiers at the border? We know that the National Guard's mission is usually to go in times of crisis, inclement weather, provide backup support for a community. They are down there on a fool's errand. They're killing themselves. They don't have the proper equipment, and that poor man died. I need to hear from you. What's your plan to get these guys out?
Rhonda, thank you for being here. Thank you for your service. And thank you for literally standing up for those who are serving us right now. 10,000 of our fellow Texans were involuntarily activated. That means they had a week, more or less, to say goodbye to their kids, to leave their job, to tell their spouse that they'll see them in a year, to be deployed to the border, where they have no powers of arrest or detention under our Constitution, where many of them are sitting in Humvees and hoping that they spot somebody, but more often than not, they're on a cell phone, they're talking to a buddy, they're just trying to pass the hours. And I've met so many of them, and you know what they do? They're nurses, who have had to leave hospitals where they are desperately needed, and they're sitting in a Humvee right now, not able to help anybody. There are these school teachers and educators that I just talked about, whose kids are desperately missing them right now. Their moms, their dads who want to be with their families. And when I meet them, I say, hey, tell me why you joined the Guard. I'll tell you, so many have told me, I saw what the Guardsmen did in 2017 when Hurricane Harvey hit. They were literally saving people's lives, and I wanted to do just what they were doing. And they said, look, I'm happy to be activated. If you need to send me to war because that's what this country decides, I put my name on the line, I will do it. If another hurricane or natural disaster hits, I'm there. I want to save lives, that's why I signed up. But I don't want to be used as a prop in this political theater, in this re-election campaign of our sitting governor. And these are Republicans and Democrats alike who are sharing this with me. Some who I don't know if they'll ever vote for me. That does not matter. What matters is their service and the fact that we're letting them down. 7 have lost their lives that we know of so far since they've been activated by this governor. So what I have told them and what I'll tell you in answer to your question is, if I were the governor, I would bring them home right now, back to their families, to their communities, and to their careers. And I would make this commitment. I will never involuntarily activate you unless we have a real crisis or a real emergency. If we're going to honor your service, then we have to act like it, right? And so we got to make sure that we do right by them. So thank you for asking the question. Thank you for being here, Rhonda. Thank you.
Again, thank you so much for coming. When I asked you, you came. Thank you. I'm Renata Murray. I'm a councilor in Brazoria County, and I'm also running for district clerk in Brazoria County. My question to you is this. What do you feel about what Governor Abbott is saying about the undocumented people that are here? He doesn't want to educate them. I feel they should get an education. I feel that we have to have some type of comprehensive immigration. What do you think, and how can we push that a little bit more? Thank you.
Councilmember, thank you first and foremost for the invitation to be here, for your public service, and for the great question. You know what I thought was so key in the way that Governor Abbott talked about this issue this week was he is against funding the education for all kids in the state of Texas. Now, he may try to parse out which kids he's talking about, but he said out loud what so many of us have known, certainly what our educators have known all along. On average, the Texas school teacher is underpaid by $7,500 a year in this state. Greg Abbott has everything to do with that. Per pupil spending down $4,000 against the national average. And you've got a governor who's now telling you what version of history you're allowed to teach or not allowed to teach. You've got a governor who is attacking you on a daily basis. No wonder it is so hard to be able to keep these educators in our classrooms right now. So we've got to turn that around. We've got to also acknowledge that he's proposed defunding public ed even further, turning our public tax dollars and taking them away from our public school classrooms and sending them to private schools in the form of vouchers. Now listen, there may be some private schools that some kids who are lucky enough to already have the wealth and can benefit from that voucher can go to in Pearland or in Houston or in El Paso, where I'm from. But think about our fellow Texans who live in rural communities where there is no private school. And that public school is the largest employer. It's a lifeline for the community. It's the best ticket to a better future. He's going to take their tax dollars as well and convert them into vouchers for schools that their kids could never even dream of attending. So I want to make sure that we call this out and make sure everyone understands what he's doing right now. And on this issue of immigration, you know, thinking back to Rhonda's question about these guardsmen, the way I see it, whether it's school teachers or transgender kids or their parents or these members of the Guard, Governor Abbott sees people as props that allow him to pursue power. We see power as a means of serving people in public office, right? That's the big difference between the two of us in this race. I'm going to make sure that on the issues of the border and immigration, because you touched on that as well, that we have real leadership in the state of Texas, that we help this country and our congressmen rewrite our immigration laws in our own image here in the state of Texas, in our own image as the most diverse communities in the country, bar none, right where we are right now. This is a source of strength, of success, and yes, safety. And we need to make sure that the rest of the country, the rest of the state, understands that as well. We can have rule of law, we can have order where our country meets the rest of the world, and we can make the most of those who choose to come here by following our laws, not only to make themselves better, but to make all of us better as a result. Thank you for asking the question. Appreciate it.
In the middle.
What's going on, Betty? Eugene here. My question is people have approached me, and it's a very known fact that Texas has the most African Americans, has more African Americans than any other state in the union. So, which means we can't win unless we turn out. So, what is a way that your campaign is going to energize the African American community? I know we always lump black and brown, but how specifically are you going to address the issues that matter to our community? Thank you.
Thank you, Eugene. And again, thank you for making this possible here tonight. I want your help. And I want the help of anyone who's willing to introduce me, to connect me, to give me a chance to earn the votes that for far too long, let's be honest with each other, have been taken for granted. Not by present company, but if the great sin committed by Republicans was to seek to disenfranchise voters in the state of Texas, then that committed by some Democrats, none in this room, is to take those same voters for granted. And to say, because you're black, of course you're going to vote for me. Well, that's not true. And we understand that that's not right. And every single vote must be earned. And the way I know how to do it, and listen, I'm not the smartest guy out there, but it is to show up, to be with, to listen to, and learn from those that I want to serve. And whether that's here today in Brazoria County, whether it's tomorrow, and when I hope you all join us in Houston at Discovery Green at 11 a.m. for a rally for reproductive freedom. But also, as you know, traveling to Port Arthur and to Beaumont and to Nacogdoches, and making sure that people understand that when we say rural Texas, sometimes that's a byword for white Texas. Nothing could be further from the truth, at least as far as my travels are concerned. And those black voters specifically, who for far too long feel as though they've been left to their own devices, perhaps by our state party, not for any intent, but maybe for lack of resources, from previous statewide candidates who maybe didn't have the ability to get out and visit them in these smaller places, but who were either taken for granted or written off altogether. I'm making sure that we show up, and we show up where people gather, not just expecting people to come to us. That's important, and it's going to take a ton of work. But I know that we can do it. I know specifically, Eugene, you can do it, because I literally walked those 30 miles with you from Georgetown to Austin. So if you are willing to lead, I am very happy to follow and make sure that we get this done. Thank you for asking. Appreciate it.
At the top, to your right. To your right.
There we go.
Hello, Mr. O'Rourke. This is Tim Barlack. It's a pleasure to have you with us on tonight.
Thank you.
My question is this. During the previous presidential administration, the Congress passed a law that limited the amount that individuals could deduct on their taxes. They effectively created a tax on paying taxes. As many of us who just recently, in the last couple of weeks, have received our property tax assessments, they've skyrocketed some 30% in many cases. What I'd like to know is, given the number of initiatives that we need to fund in the state, what is your plan specifically as governor to help deliver tax relief, not only to homeowners, but also to the thousands and millions of people who are renters across the state who are now being pushed out of homes, pushed out of the ability to find a place to live? What is your plan specifically to fund all of these great programs and also deliver tax relief for all of the great citizens of the state of Texas?
Thank you for the question, Tim. That's great. Little context. Over the last 7 years since Abbott has been governor, property taxes in this state have gone up $20 billion. It's up 40% on his watch. You know that you're paying more on your utility bills because when those folks stole $11 billion from us during that winter freeze while people were dying in their homes, he told them that they could charge 200 times the going rate of gas. Well, someone had to pay the bill at the end of the day, and it turns out it is you. and it is me. $50 on average per month, every month going forward for the next 20 years. And these latest appraisals that just came out, I was just in Boerne, Texas. Their appraised value shot up 50% just this last year. How can you stay in your home? How can you stay in your home? So your great question is, what are we going to do about it? A couple of ideas. One, I mentioned Medicaid expansion earlier. Not only does that $10 billion, it's now built up to $100 billion over the last 10 years. Not only does that $10 billion allow us to hire more providers, to serve more people, not only does it keep more of those rural county hospitals from closing down, but it also begins to lower our property taxes, because when that person with diabetes and glaucoma who doesn't have insulin or insurance finally succumbs to the suffering and drags themselves to the hospital, where the outcomes will be worse and the cost that much more expensive because they never got preventative care, someone's going to have to pay the bill at the end of the day. And that is typically the county property taxpayer. It's true in El Paso, it's true in Harris County, I bet it's true in Brazoria as well. Bringing $10 billion down a year is really going to help us. Another idea. The state right now is paying 40% of the load on public ed. It used to be 50%, but something happened along the way as our classrooms became more diverse. The state says, you know what, I'm not so much interested in paying my fair share of this. I'm going to push this down to you, the local property taxpayer. You pick up the bill for local education. Well, I'm going to work with Ron and I'm going to work with Alma to make sure that we get back up to 50% again at a minimum. That's also going to reduce pressure on the renter, because the renter is going to pay those property taxes that are passed through, and the homeowner as well. And it's not just a Democratic Party idea. Charlie Guerin, one of Ron and Alma's colleagues, has authored the bill that would raise that limit up to 50%. That's another thing we can do. But let me tell you the kicker. So I mentioned I was in Port Arthur recently, and I was meeting with their great mayor there and their great president of their school board, who informed me that he just cut a $30 million check to Motiva, which is the largest refinery in North America. Motiva can hire the lobbyists, Motiva can hire the attorneys, Motiva can contest their valuation, unlike your ability to contest your valuation, and get the school board to refund them $30 million in taxes that they're going to pay. Now, the need for those $30 million does not disappear because they cut the check. They've got to now extract that from homeowners and renters in Jefferson County. So here's what I propose. And this may be somewhat controversial among some, but if we have full disclosure in what we pay for properties, commercial properties, by corporations, they can no longer hide behind those attorneys and those lawyers, and we would pick up another $4 to $6 billion a year for our state budget, again, bringing down property taxes. Last idea. We are one of the last states in the union that locks people up for possession of a substance that is legal in almost every other state in the union. And though Texans of all races and ethnicities use marijuana at the same rate, disproportionately it is black and brown Texans who are stopped, who are frisked, who are incarcerated, who upon release have to check a box saying that they have a conviction on every job application form, every student loan application form. This costs us $500 million a year to enforce in the state of Texas. We lose out on another $500 million a year of income if we were to tax the regulated and controlled sale of marijuana. It's one of the reasons that I propose that we make that legal in the state of Texas going forward. It's the right thing to do on moral grounds, but it will also reduce the burden that we have on our property taxes, paying for all this incarceration. So the billions that I just described, with the state picking up its fair share, making sure that corporations pay their fair share of property taxes, and doing smart, common sense, bipartisan things, like making sure that marijuana is legal in Texas, all of that will reduce your property tax bill. Thank you for asking. Appreciate it. Gracias.
Hey, my name's Jason. I'm glad that tomorrow you're holding the rally. I'll be there. Hopefully most of you will be there. I'm definitely not a believer in any kind of religion or God. So my question actually goes to the First Amendment. How are you going to keep church and state separated? Because as we clearly know, there's a direct tie between abortion bans and church.
Thank you so much for being here and for asking that great question. It's got to be the people, right? It's got to be the people who decide the outcomes of these issues, whether it's reproductive health care or marriage equality, something else that will be attacked because under Justice Alito's reading of the Constitution, because it's not explicitly conferred as a right, that means that it can be taken away from those who today are legally married in the state of Texas. And make no mistake, if this decision is rendered, that's next on the block for our neighbors, our friends, and our family members going forward. I bring these two up because very often they're spoken of in the context of religious belief. And we don't begrudge anyone for any belief that they hold and any decision that they come to on either of these issues. Those are deeply personally held beliefs, and you have your right to them. You mentioned the First Amendment just like everyone else does, but it cannot be through religion. It cannot be through our faith that we decide the outcome for our fellow Texans. It has to be from the people, and it has to be from those who freely choose their representatives at the ballot box. It has to be those who are able to hold them accountable in forums just like this one. It has to be people who are able to run for office regardless of how they pray or whether, as you just suggested, you pray at all. So I think that's the beauty and the genius of this democracy, is that whatever the differences between us, including of religion, we're able ultimately to come together and decide our future and our fortune, the direction that this community, this state, and our country will take. So we want to respect all religious freedom, including the freedom from having any religious beliefs at all. And I'll make sure that we say that in this position of public trust and power. Thank you for bringing this up.
All right, I'm going to get over to that side after this question.
Hey, I'm one of the educators that you are talking about, and I teach reading in 4th grade. And thank you. So, a school I was at in Houston before was very literacy focused, and we won the best urban school in the country. And then I'm at a new school this year, and over 40% of my students in 4th grade are below 1st grade reading level, and I have 3 out of my 40 kids that are on or above their reading level. So this is in the state of having computers that don't work, libraries that aren't open. My story's not special. So what are you going to be doing in this time when we're promoting math and science to promote literacy and make sure that our kids can read so that they can have a successful life?
Cynthia, I want to make sure that we stay in touch with him. And after we have this exchange, let's get his contact info. Because one of the things that I often talk about when I describe the challenge that we have in public education in Texas is that 7 out of 10 4th graders in the average 4th grade classroom cannot read at grade level. And as you know, and you kind of alluded to this, it is unfortunately going to be a predictor of their ability to perform in later grades, their ability to graduate from high school, to pursue post-secondary education, to find a living wage job that provides them with the purpose and function that we all crave. And I bet you could tell us better than anyone else that you can't fix that in 4th grade. You can't fix that in 3rd grade. It's why I'm a proponent of all-day universal pre-K across the state of Texas. You fix that when the kid is 3 and 4 and 5 years old. And right now, your luck, because that's all it is, of getting that education and that socialization and those skills that will allow you to perform in this gentleman's classroom in the 4th grade is to some great degree in the state of Texas determined by zip code and determined by income and determined just by luck to whom you are born and the bank account that your parents have. That should not be the case in the state of Texas in this great democracy. So that is, for starters, something we can do. But something that I hear from your colleagues is that as more teachers leave the profession, more kids are coming into their classroom, their workload is increasing. You mentioned all those kids who need your help right now. You sound like you're an amazing teacher, but can one person deliver that kind of instruction and care and help to all of those kids? I don't know. My 5th grader, Henry, he goes to the same great public school I went to, Mesita Elementary, and we're now in May. His school year started in August. He has yet to have a permanent classroom teacher. He's on his 4th substitute teacher, and we love the substitutes. It's a tough job, but it's hard for him and his classmates to form an attachment to them because are they going to be gone next Monday, next month? Who knows? And who will they be replaced by? They're not getting the level of education that they really deserve through no fault of those subs or the teachers who are there, but as they leave the profession, it's really hard to deliver the instruction. So we've got to make sure, I mentioned pay, that's going to be a big thing, but treating teachers as the professionals that they are. So many of your peers and colleagues have told me, hey Beto, this STAR test, beyond being so dang ineffective for what it is supposed to measure, I have to spend months of classroom time doing test prep. My kids are taking the STAR test right now in El Paso. They're stressed out the night before, the days before. Their teacher is stressed out because their school will get a one-letter grade based on one test after 2 years of learning loss. This is the last thing that we need. You need to be spending those months helping those kids read at grade level and making sure that you're doing everything you can for the kids who read over grade level right now to keep them engaged. So hiring back more of these teachers, one idea I have is wiping out the student loan debt that you have. If you're willing to stay in this profession, the fact that we ask you to take out tens of thousands of dollars in debt to teach our kids is an injustice. And I want to make sure if you're thinking about getting in the profession that we remove that as an obstacle. We should be welcoming you in, thanking you for what you are doing, and begging you to stay in the job. 50% of educators in the state of Texas leave the profession within the first 5 years of entering. Folks, that is not a good future for this state. So that's why I prioritize public education in my comments. That's why it will be a top priority for me as governor. And it's why I'm so glad we're going to get your contact information after this, because I want to stay in touch with you and learn how we do better for those fourth graders in your classroom. Thanks for being here and for what you do. Appreciate it. Thank you.
To your left. Before we take the next question, somebody turned in some keys. So if you have a Nissan, I have your keys up here. Check your pockets. I'll keep them here.
Or if you want to donate it to the campaign, we'll take it off your hands.
Hi, Beto. I'm Kaylee, and I'm a student here at U of H Clear Lake, and I'm also a mother. And for a long time, I've been uninsured. Sorry, are you emotional? And recently I was diagnosed with epilepsy. And for a long time, like I said, I wasn't insured, and I didn't make enough to afford private insurance, but I also made too much to qualify for Medicaid. And so I've been home because of my disability, but I know when I go back to work, there's a good chance that I could lose my Medicaid because the maximum income for it is only $200. And so I would like to know what you can do to help people in the gap that I'm in.
Kaylee, thank you for sharing your story so that we all understand what's going on. Sometimes when I say, Medicaid expansion would bring $10 billion in, and it would do this and that, I get lost in the numbers and the statistics, and you bring it home to what it means to us in our lives. Cynthia and I were block walking in Temple, Texas, not too long ago, and we met a mother of 4. One of her sons pretty significantly disabled, and she also takes care of her disabled brother. And her mom lives at the house as well. And that was a full van that they were all getting into when they were on their way to the zoo. And this mom shared a similar story. She said, I'm doing really well at my job. In fact, they just offered me a promotion, but I'm going to turn it down. Because if I take the promotion, it comes with a pay increase, and I'll no longer be eligible for Medicaid for my kids and my family that so desperately needs it. But I won't be earning enough to afford Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act or private insurance. And so I'm going to stay right where I am. And I saw that as another cost of our governor's unwillingness to bring down Medicaid expansion in the state of Texas. Not only would she be out the health care that she needs, but she's not going to be able to move up in life, rise to her full potential, fulfill her promise as she should be able to. The answer to your question, of course, is Medicaid expansion to begin with. Now, let me address the political challenge to that. You may think, well, certainly you, Beto, as a Democrat would want to expand Medicaid, but what about all those Republicans? That community where I met that young mother is represented by a Republican. These rural counties where 27 hospitals have closed down over the last decade, all represented by Republicans. As great as Medicaid expansion will be for Brazoria and Harris and El Paso, where I'm from, it's going to be absolutely terrific for these Republican-represented communities. Again, I want to work with Ron and Alma to listen to their Republican colleagues who I think are there. I think they're there What we're lacking is leadership to bring them to the table and say, listen, what about Medicaid expansion and the federal government paying 90 cents on the dollar of keeping your hospital open do you not like? How can we make this better for you? Because I want to get this done. I think that's where we start. We pass that, but I just want to make clear that does not finish the job in the state of Texas. When you are 50th in the nation for access to mental health care providers, when your largest inpatient psychiatric facility is the Harris County Jail in downtown Houston, Texas, when you are treating people with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and clinical depression so badly that they get arrested on purpose to be taken to jail because that might be the one place that they can get some care, then you also have to make other investments from our state resources. And the gentleman, Tim, a while ago said, well, where are we going to get all this money? I described the billions that are there in the 9th largest economy on the planet. That's Texas. It's not for lack of resources that we don't help you right now. It is for lack of political will. But I guarantee you that will exists here in this hall tonight. We just have to get after it, go knock on those doors, and win this election. Thank you for asking.
Hi, Doug.
Hey.
I would like to know, as you know, Abbott last September made it legal for everybody to carry a gun. I mean, let's invite some more ants to the picnic. we need to get these guns out of the back of people's cars so we're not living in the old west.
Thank you so much for saying that. When she talks about, folks who have guns who shouldn't have guns, let me just make this clear. This permitless carry bill that police officers and sheriff's deputies begged Greg Abbott not to sign because it would make their job that much more dangerous. He turned his back on them and signed it anyhow. And he signed it despite being told that over the last 5 years, 35,000 of our fellow Texans who applied for a license to carry and went through the background check were rejected because they have a violent criminal past, because they've beaten a spouse, because they are going to harm themselves or someone else in their life. And law enforcement stepped in and said, that person should not be carrying a loaded gun in public. Well, now all 35,000 of them are free to do so, as are the tens of thousands who knew better than to ever apply for a license to carry because they wouldn't have passed the background check. They are free to carry a gun now on our streets, and they are carrying guns on our streets. More cops are gunned down in the state of Texas than any other state, bar none. We have seen a predictable spike in gun violence in this state. More women are shot by their intimate partners in this state than almost any other state, because we make it so easy for those who are violent against those that they live with and work with to have these guns right now. Listen, I'm as Texan as the next person. 4 generations in the state, grew up with firearms in the house. My Uncle Raymond was a jail captain, sheriff's deputy, sharpshooter award, taught my sisters and me how to use a gun, but he taught us the responsibility of owning that firearm. Rhonda Hart, who's here, she proposed to me when I first met her a safe storage law that says, listen, we're going to defend your Second Amendment right. You need to have that gun for self-defense if that's what you feel, or to hunt, or for collection or sport, none of my business. But if you have kiddos in the house, if you have someone who may be a danger to themselves or someone else, you're going to keep that firearm locked up. You're going to store that thing in a way so that it cannot be used against any of us. I've listened to plenty of gun owners and non-gun owners, Republicans, Democrats. They agree with Rhonda. People agree with universal background checks. If you want to have a gun and you're going to buy it in this state, we need to make sure you're not going to hurt somebody with it. It would have prevented the mass shooting in Midland and Odessa. Guy went to a federally licensed firearms dealer, tried to buy an AR-15, wouldn't sell it to him because he couldn't pass a background check. But because we don't have a universal background check in Texas, he could buy that same gun from a private seller out of the trunk of his car and then go use it to kill people in his community. We can do better. We can defend the Second Amendment and protect the lives of our fellow Texans. And when we win this, that's exactly what we're going to do. Thank you for asking.
Thank you so much for your patience with me. I know I see a lot of hands that I'm not going to be able to get to. I have this question, and this question will be our last ones for the night, but we will stay for a little bit after to take a picture if you'd like, or say hi.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Hi, I'm Meghna Mdaliar. I'm 14, and I'm in 9th grade at Dalton High School across the street. And,
My question is regarding what you could do to help with violence in schools, because in my district, we've had, in the past couple of months, tons of gun threats and tons of bomb threats. And me and my classmates have been actually really scared in our schools. We've had to talk to our teachers about like what we're going to do in that kind of situation. So what would you do to kind of help with that problem?
I appreciate you being here. And not lost on us that not a lot of 14-year-olds will come out to a meeting like this one. And even fewer stand up in front of all these hundreds of people and ask a really important question like the one that you just asked. But I'm also a big believer in the fact that that's the only way that things ever change for the better in this country. You know, I mentioned, you know, all the things that we've overcome in the past. You know, this right to vote and finally prevailing upon LBJ to sign the Voting Rights Act in 1965. You know, Al Green's former colleague, John Lewis, he was 24 years old when he was crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, and galvanized the country's attention and shocked the conscience of America and really forced Congress to do its job. I think that's the only way it would have happened. And he and so many other young people over the years leading up to Bloody Sunday, they made that happen. I mentioned abortion rights earlier. It didn't just happen with that one case. It was everyone who got up and got after it, very young people who understood their rights and their lives were at stake. That's how it happened. And on this issue of gun violence, as painful as this is to talk about, it's painful because we have survivors here in the room with us right now. It's painful because I've been on stages like this for really the last 11 years, starting when I first ran for Congress. And this question keeps coming up, and I'm ashamed as an American and as a Texan that I still have to answer the same way, that there's something we will do in the future. Why haven't we done this? How many more people have to lose their lives? How much more damage and suffering do we have to endure for us finally to do the right thing? I don't know the answer to that question. I mentioned Lawrence Nixon waiting 20 years from when he first filed suit in 1924. 1944, he could finally win the right to vote. It may take a long time. We always have to respond when we're told that we can't. You know, I know you feel that way, but I've got to try. That's what I've got to do right now, and that's why you're here. So listen, I mentioned Rhonda Hart's excellent idea of safe storage, universal background checks. We may not agree, all of us here, and all of us as Texans, on other more controversial issues around the Second Amendment. But I bet you that we can begin there with those. And if we cannot help Al Green's colleagues to do their job because he's been ready to do this from day one, then we may have to do this in Texas on our own. And it may surprise and shock the rest of the country. Texas, of all places, you guys are going to be a leader on reducing gun violence while protecting the Second Amendment. I didn't know you had it in you. But it's going to be because of you and others who forced the issue through your representatives in the state legislature that we get that done. So please do not give up. Please keep pushing us. Hold us accountable. And I promise you I will do my part as well. Thank you.
All right. Before we start, I just want to point out Ellen from our team is where the line will start. So if you'd like to stay again, that's where the line will start. We'll be up
Cynthia,
on
are
the
we
stage.
looking for hosts today?
No, not today.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. Last question.
Hi, my name is Christiana. Thank you first for being here. So I was a high school student during the Santa Fe shooting, and I have my own personal connections to it. I'm also a woman worried for my rights, and I'm also a person who's just worried about the state of our state and our country and the world. I'm in this state because of Republican policies, especially in the past couple of years. So how do you plan to get all of your plans in action while dealing with conservative pushback, which is guaranteed?
It's a really good question, and I just tell you, you're not alone in feeling this way. I met a young mother who is the spouse of an active member of the Air Force earlier today in Boerne, Texas, who has a transgender child. And she said, you know what, we planned upon my husband's retirement to settle here in Texas. We love this state. We love the people here. We love Boerne. It's awesome. But what we don't love are these policies that we see coming down right now and these attacks on us as a family and on our child. And so we're thinking about leaving. We're thinking about going to New Mexico. She said because they love the margaritas there. You know, other people were shouting out other states. And But all of us as a group agreed that she's got to stay in Texas because she has to be part of the solution to this challenge that she faces. And we've got to be there for her as well. We honor her and her family's service and their commitment to our country through the Air Force. But we got to show it, right? We got to demonstrate it. They cannot just be empty words. We got to make sure that we fight for her and her child and her family. And I want to fight for you as well. And I want you to be so excited that you made a decision to stay in Texas because you stood and you fought. Now, I don't know, some people describe it as, cutting and running if you leave the state. I don't judge anyone at all who feels like they have to leave. If we think about those who are most affected by this trigger law and this abortion ban, it is overwhelmingly those of the most meager resources and incomes who don't have the luxury to fly to another state to make their own personal health care decisions. If they decide they need to leave now, I do not judge them. That may be the best for them and their families. But for those who can and are willing to stay and to be in this fight, the way I look at it, and I don't know how you feel, but there's no other place I would rather be. To few generations fall the opportunity and the responsibility of responding to the kinds of attacks that we're seeing today on our democracy, on a woman's right to choose, on people being able to be who they are and love like they want to love and fulfill their true potential here in this state. This is all under attack right now, but all of us have a chance to respond to that. And there's something that for me is energizing and invigorating and encouraging to me that we get to be in this fight at this defining moment of truth. So if you're up for it, we would love to have you, and with everyone else who has joined us by texting that code, Texas to 20377. We want you knocking on doors with us and sharing your story and telling people that you have a choice. As a young person, you can go anywhere on this planet, and you're going to choose to stay in Texas because you're going to fight for Texas, and Texas is going to come through for you. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for everyone for joining us. To Congressman Al Green for kicking us off, making this such a special meeting. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We will see you all soon. Join us tomorrow at Discovery Green in Houston if you can. Gracias.
I feel good.